right. We will call to order the Petersburg Borough Assembly meeting on this April 1st, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Kurt?
Here.
Mark?
Mark is excused.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Brandy? Here.
We have 6 people here today. Let's rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and before we get down to the approval of minutes, I see a beautiful sunshiny day outside, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. And that is my weak attempt at an April Fool's joke, so we'll move on from there. Moving on to approval of minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 4th, 25th, March 4th, and March 18th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Michi and seconded by Member Morrell. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Time to, I would entertain a motion to amend or approve the meeting agenda as it is.
So moved. Second.
Been moved to approve by Member Michi, seconded by Member Woolhooter. I'm hearing no amendment, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. There are no public hearings today, and there are no bid awards. Which brings us to persons to be heard related to the agenda. And anybody will be excellent. We see one hand for that. And just a reminder, you'll be given 5 minutes, and anyone speaking, we ask them to adhere to Robert's rules, just meaning please be respectful and civil in your testimony. So please step forward and state your name and who you represent.
Okay, my name is Karen Hofstad, and I'm here speaking about the proposed letter to the governor to come down to Petersburg. And I just, I can't believe we're talking about the survival of Alaska, but I think this is some weird stuff going on here. And I just want to read to you a portion of, I went on the website of Americans for Prosperity, that's kind of pulling the governor's string here, and they're the ones that are setting up the meetings around the state with all the rules and regulations. And this is what I just took off their website. So everybody go check it out, because I couldn't remember any discussion on this at our state level, but it says, as lawmakers tried to push through a bill that would have created a state income tax, Americans for Prosperity and our activists led the way in making sure Alaskan families wouldn't face another tax. AFP helped keep enough allies in line by focusing the debate around the state's years of excessive spending. Thanks to the efforts of our activists, Alaska remains income tax free. The fight for freedom is just beginning. Sign up to join the movement for a more prosperous Alaska. Join the movement button. And then here's the website. And I don't remember any discussion yet. I've been following the legislature. I was up there for a day and a half last week to go around and talk to the legislators. And then when it was announced that they were having meetings, constituents meetings at the areas, I thought, God, they didn't have Southeast. So I called up immediately. That's how naive I was about that. And I was assured by one of the staff that that was just the first run of the meetings. They're going to reschedule more. But now I think people have understood what that means. It's just a speaking, please to brainwash people that do show up. Because I didn't get the details, but I heard on the radio where somebody was speaking, wanted to speak to the governor in Nome, was put in jail. And this kind of stuff. And this is our state.
Thank you for your comments.
Go to their website, and you can see who's yanking our governor's chain.
Other people or persons with views related to the agenda who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. Persons to be heard unrelated to the agenda? Go ahead, Becky. Just your name and who you represent, please, and I'll... 5 minutes for all of us. Whenever you're set.
Good afternoon. My name is Becky Knight. I represent myself today. I request that you take action regarding your November 6, 2018 letter to Vicki Christensen, Chief of the Forest Service. The Forest Service claimed to have sent a response before year's end, but that response is long overdue. Specifically, the letter requested, quote, any information related to follow-up actions by the Forest Service on the high-level and internal June 2016 Washington Office Activity Review. Clearly, the agency has no will to provide transparent information or any information at all regarding the issue. They have hid behind the bureaucratic veil far too long. This high-level review concerns the formal findings and maladministration of 2 local timber sales, the Tonka Mountain Timber Sale and the Big Thorn Project located on Prince of Wales Island. And the Tonka project is right across from us, across the Narrows. The Big Thorn sale was the nation's largest timber sale at the time, as well as the largest in southeast Alaska in about 2 decades. It has been nearly 3 years since the Washington Office Activity Review was completed, and that was an internal review, never intended for public consumption. 7 years since the Tonka project was approved, and 6 years since the Big Thorn project was approved. As described in the review and follow-up documentation, these 2 large timber sales found staggering monetary losses that amounted to almost $4 million. That's $1.7 million for Big Thorn and $2 million for Tonka. This is likely the tip of the iceberg. In all, there were 18 formal findings of serious maladministration included in the review, too lengthy to detail here today, but with the exception of Member Norheim, most of you have had the review for about a year now and should be familiar. It is inconceivable that the agency has failed to transparently address this issue of public concern in the 3 years since completion of the internal review. In the meantime, the agency was able to fully plan and approve another massive timber sale on Prince of Wales Island called the Prince of Wales Landscape Level Analysis, almost twice the size of the Big Thorn on Prince of Wales Island, and that's in terms of cutting of timber, old-growth timber, and largely to plan and soon release draft of the local Central Tongass project, a huge timber sale of similar size as the Big Thorn. In the absence of a transparent investigation, the public can only conclude the maladministration will continue unabated for these subsequent timber sales, greatly costing communities and the environment greatly. Your November 6th letter was sent in lieu of a previously considered and much stronger request to the Agriculture Department's Office of Inspector General for a forensic audit of the 2 timber sales. This tepid letter was sent based on information by Member Lynn from an unnamed Forest Service official who claimed that the results of a follow-up Forest Service investigation were to, quote, be completed soon, but with date unknown. The Assembly accepted at face value the advice of Member Lynn to not muck up an ongoing investigation with an OIG request for an OIG audit. I question the Assembly's reliance on an individual Assembly member who sought and provided information from an unnamed agency source, that is hearsay, and their use of that hearsay as a basis for taking any action. Clearly, such reliance is undependable, and now, 4 months later, appears to have been yet another stalling tactic by the agency. Judging by the complete failure of the Forest Service to transparently address the findings in the review, it is likely the effort is to run out the clock on the statute of limitations. And I'm serious about that. Some call this a cover-up. I believe inaction on your part is not an option during this time of austerity. If the 2016 agency documentation found huge monetary shortfalls, then our borough and region suffered major monetary losses in the form of stewardship jobs. That's because these sales were stewardship sales. The Assembly must, in the best interest of the public, take this issue seriously and ask for an audit by the Agriculture Department of Inspector General. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else here today with views unrelated to the agenda? Okay. We'll move on to board, commission, committee reports. There are none. It brings us to the consent agenda. Beachcomber Lodge LLC liquor license transfer of ownership. The Beachcomber Lodge LLC has applied with the Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office to accept ownership of the Beachcomber Inn's liquor license. The Assembly may support or protest the application. A protest may not be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. I would entertain a motion to approve this transfer.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Morall. Now, generally in the consent agenda, it's not something that's discussed a whole lot, but are there any protests at this point that you'd like to bring up? Member Mucci.
It's not a protest, but just, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Yes.
It's just, it's a transfer from one party to the other, but it looks like, as far as I can tell, it's only one party on this, or am I reading this wrong?
Well, I didn't give you all the paperwork because it has personal stuff on it, but it is
Okay.
from one party to another party.
Okay.
They are selling the facility, and I think the license comes along with it.
Sure, I didn't know if both parties were supposed to be on this piece of paper so we can see who it was transferred from and to.
I think I can certainly say, if you,
That's fine.
I believe it is from Sig and Cynthia Mathieson to Amber and Sig Burrell.
Okay, thank you very much.
Seeing no protests, will the clerk call the roll?
Taylor,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Randy. Yes. Kurt.
Yes.
All right, it passes unanimously, and good luck on your future endeavors. Brings us to the report of other officers. Don Jarrett with McMillan Jacobs will provide us a presentation regarding the Blind Slough Hydroelectric Project, the scope of work, estimated project costs, and timeline. Mr. Jarrett and Utility Director Hagerman will be available to answer Assembly questions. So the floor is yours, sir. Or sirs.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'll introduce Don. Don works with McMillan Jacobs. As the Assembly knows, the Power and Light's been working on a project to evaluate and identify the condition of the Blind Slough Hydro Project and also the projects to improve it over the years. Don's been leading that for the engineering firm, and so I'll hand the microphone to him, and he can go through this. I'm going to be operating the slides from back here, so he'll have to give me the high sign when he wants a change.
Well, thank you, Carl. It's my pleasure to address the Assembly Borough of Petersburg on such a beautiful day. Not a great hydro day, but again, I thought it'd be appropriate, and I think we were all in agreement, Stephen, that it was time to give you all a little bit of background on what we've been doing the last year. We've been working hard for the borough, Petersburg Municipal Power and Light, on the Blind Slough project, and I thought, we could, like I say, give you a little bit of a summary of what we've accomplished in terms of the studies that have been performed, and a little bit of presentation on the project itself. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with it, but after this, you'll be perhaps sleeping, but hopefully not. Anyway, next slide. Like we said, the project, as you know, is a bit of an older facility. It's a bit of a hidden gem for the borough. Our work was to help with basically planning for the future of the facility. And in order to do that, the scope of work that we agreed to perform was a condition assessment of the existing facility, and a review of alternatives, a development of alternatives, and an evaluation of those alternatives for various work components that could be performed, and then building on all of that information, a recommended capital improvement plan. I might just give you a little bit of a quick background on the project. Project was built starting in 1921, wasn't complete until about 1926. So there were some people way back when thinking ahead as to how to power this area with a renewable resource. The project actually had some additional work done in 1929 to add the second unit out in the powerhouse out there. About 1951, that unit got destroyed in a fire. So then in about that same time period, there was a flurry of work. In 55, there was a new dam built that replaced the old timber crib dam with the current rock-filled dam. New penstock was put in place. The original penstock you'll see in some of the pictures was actually made out of wood with some wire wrapped around it, as the technology wasn't all that great for that kind of high pressure. And a new powerhouse with a brand new unit, 1955 unit, supplied by an old-style American manufacturer, Alice Chalmers. Other work went on over the years. There's been a couple penstock failures. One in about, I think, 1993, and then again in about 2006 when there was a misoperation of a valve. So again, this is sort of a hidden jewel up there on the hill, and I'm sure that Bob Zimke would be glad to give you a tour anytime you want to see more of what you have up there. Next slide, please.
Don, before you go on, the FERC license, when is the FERC license up for renewal on that? Do you remember?
I think it's a 50-year license that was issued in 94. Actually, it's kind of funny. One of
Director Hagerman has the answer.
I think the last time we have a 30-year license now, and so the next time it's up for renewal is 2032 or 2034. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we actually have one of our staff, Heidi Watto, worked with Nan Nalder. I don't know if you remember some of those names, but they were part of that team that did the relicensing effort for Petersburg. And a licensing process is a long and involved process, even on a small project, because there's a lot of people that get to have a say. So condition assessment, this is again going through the various components of the project and evaluating their condition to basically help us plan for the future. When would we need to consider repairs that are major or replacements? So we looked at all the equipment inside the powerhouse, noted a number of concerning issues. It's all original equipment, 1955. Kind of my age group. We're getting a little old, a little tired. Turbine efficiency, it's a single jet Pelton. It's pretty low efficiency, and it doesn't have much of an ability to operate over a large range of flows. So a year like this year, when you're trying to scale back flows to keep the reservoir up and maintain water flows and supply enough water for the hatchery, its efficiency at those flows is very low. The generator itself has significant issues with the insulation of the windings, and this type of machine, a synchronous machine, also has rotor poles that are important in controlling the voltage. We know one of the pole windings is actually shorted out, not operating properly, so any further degradation could cause a need for refurbishment of those poles, which can take several months to ship them out, have somebody recondition them and bring them back in. Excitation of the generators with carbon brushes that creates a lot of dusting in the powerhouse. It's a maintenance problem. The governor is an antique, beautiful, but very much an antique, and there's only a handful of people probably in the world that can actually do the maintenance on that governor. Last time Bob brought out somebody from Wisconsin that was capable of doing that kind of maintenance. There's a lot of other electrical controls and protective relays that are all quite old, 1955 vintage, still in service, but difficult to maintain and may not be able to be continued to maintain over time. Let's go to the next slide. We looked pretty significantly at the penstock. Again, it's 1955. Penstocks are known to last a long time, but that's a pretty good chunk of time. We don't know a lot about the inside of the penstock. It's not been surveyed.
What is a penstock?
Penstock's what brings the water down the hill. Thank you, Stephen, from the dam. So it's the big pipe that runs through the forest, and we'll show you some pictures of it. It's pretty impressive. It's, let's just say it's difficult access to get to it. You bet. It's got some problems with supports, both on the concrete supports and the steel supports. The couplings, there's a lot of couplings on this penstock, which is not normal practice anymore. Each of those couplings has hardware associated with it and a gasket associated with it, all of which are in either poor or unknown condition that needs to be better evaluated. Again, access to the penstock is very challenging and would generally be considered unsafe. We went through and identified in the condition assessment urgent priority things, and these included a couple of items of note. There's a bypass valve that can be used to provide water to the hatchery if the unit's not operating. Its condition is largely unknown. The generator neutral connections represent an arc flash hazard to the operating personnel at the facility. And, like I said, the protective relays, which protect the unit from damage in conditions like line disturbances or other faults in the system, are very old. They have not been calibrated on a regular schedule that is normally recommended, and again, are difficult to maintain. So from there, we went into looking at alternatives. And this, next slide, please. Kind of a normal gauntlet of kind of planning alternatives. Do nothing is sort of your base case that you compare other things to. Plan small refurbishment projects, which is sort of what's going on today. Powerhouse refurbishment upgrade and penstock repair and upgrade and intake improvements are more major capital improvement projects. Next slide, please. The do nothing alternative, again, is something that we talk about, but it is generally not something we're going to recommend because obviously it means you're going to run equipment to failure. And running equipment to failure is neither safe nor prudent from a utility perspective, because once you have the safety issues, you worry about people getting hurt, and with a failure, you have long outages that you then would have to run diesel generation or purchase replacement power from SEPA. So, of course, we don't recommend that. Next slide. Plan small refurbishments. This is sort of what's going on today. Basically, Bob and Jed and others on the project go and do small repair projects to try and keep things going, and they've done a great job at that. They do very well at that. But this means there's a lot of things that need to be done given our evaluation of the facility, and so you have a lot of little projects. You probably know this, but they actually have other things to do as well. So trying to get these other projects done in a timely manner becomes very challenging. It take a long time to catch up with projects that need to be done through a small project approach. So again, we don't recommend that approach. Next slide, please. So we get into the more, let's say, significant capital improvement projects. Powerhouse refurbishment or upgrade alternatives were looked at. One was just let's refurbish the equipment that's in the powerhouse, do the minimum amount that's necessary to keep it operating and extend its life. We looked at maybe a new runner for the turbine, a rewind to the generator, some new electrical equipment and a governor. We compared that with an upgrade with a new turbine and a new generator and new electrical equipment. And the benefit of the new turbine is that you would probably go to what's called a two-jet machine, which would provide you a much wider range of operation. That was probably the most significant thing. The other is the generator. A replacement of the generator would get rid of the problems that it has now. Rather long outage to rewind a generator. You know about Tyee and how they shipped theirs out, and it took them several months to get it done. And the other electrical equipment as well. But it looked like, based on our analysis of the water flows over a few years, that you could pick up another 10 to 13% energy with a double jet machine. So this looks like a better, more cost-effective approach to this refurbishment than just doing the minor repairs to keep it operating.
When I read your dissertation here, the 13%, are you talking about 13% on an annual basis, or are we talking about a daily, for instance, are we going to be able to increase our voltage, or, our output?
It would be on an annual basis is the analysis that was performed. And again, this is just an efficiency improvement. It's not like you are putting in a bigger machine. We do have limitations on increasing the size of the machine because of the FERC license. But the truth of the matter is you rarely spill at this project, so a bigger unit that can pass more flow doesn't look to have much benefit from the studies we've done. But yeah, it was pretty impressive to me because obviously your project is producing power for about 1 cent per kilowatt hour. If you buy replacement power from SEPA, it's 7 cents. So every kilowatt that this plant produces, it's a 7-to-1 benefit to you. Next slide. Penstock, again, we looked at a spectrum of options for the penstock. My first thought was, gee, it'd be probably cost effective to replace it. And at the same time, given the value of the power, re-optimize the size of the pipe to reduce losses, because that again would be like an efficiency improvement. We went through that, and based on other recent projects that we've been involved with, it's about a $14 million project. So we compared that to just doing some repairs, going through and repairing the foundations, fixing and replacing some of the coupling gaskets, doing some other internal assessment work to make sure that the condition inside is going to be okay. And that's more like a $2 million project. And the $2 million project, no big surprise, looks to be quite a bit more cost effective than the 14. We believe that even the $2 million project will give you another 40 years of life. It's not an insignificant chunk of work at $2 million, but it didn't look like it was going to pay back for the larger improvement project with the generation that you would increase. So we recommended proceeding with the repair of the project. Next slide.
I have a question.
Certainly.
Did you recommend, I didn't see, did you recommend the powerhouse refurbishment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And we kind of took this through the process as two separate projects. I'll speak to combine those projects a little bit later on.
Good.
We did look at intake improvements. We have seen at other projects where some way to get additional reservoir storage is beneficial. Take Swan Lake. We hope it'll be beneficial, but the analysis done there was that, yeah, there was enough spill that putting in the flashboards there and increasing storage would give you more operating flexibility and lead to a generation benefit. When we did that study here, we didn't see the benefit. And it was going to be about $1 million. What was proposed was to take and add a pipe from the dam on its intake out into the lake. The lake gets quite deep as it gets out toward the middle of the lake. And so then you would be able to draw that water from lower elevation through a siphoning type arrangement and pick up another 20 foot of storage. Cost was quite expensive, $1 million or more, and there was very little generation benefit because, again, there's not typically spill going on at this project. Original sizing of the generating facility was done pretty well back in the 50s, and we couldn't see that we would pick up a benefit with that increased storage. There are some issues with respect to the hatchery because they have problems with warm water in the summers. They would love to see something like this done. It could be something could be discussed with Sarah if they want to pick up some of that cost to make it cost effective for both parties. But we couldn't recommend it based on the valuation that we did.
A question on that. If that was put in and we have a siphon on that, will that cause us a problem in the drawing air or some kind of a turbulent flow inside that penstock, which would cause which would cause us a problem in the future?
The design, which is used on quite a few projects, I think there's a project in southeast Alaska also that has a siphon intake. You can only draw down so far, and you have to design within the constraints of the ability for the siphon to operate and to have enough submergence over the inlet to the siphon intake so that you don't pull in air. So it is a consideration that has to be made during the design and limits how much you can draw down that way, for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Excellent. Our last phase here was the capital improvement plan. So we took these selected options and said, all right, let's look at those a little more in detail, talk about what is going to be involved in terms of engineering support related to it, refine our costs a little more, and talk about a contracting strategy for each of the 2 projects that we proposed initially, the powerhouse refurbishment and the penstock repair. For most of these types of projects with the refurbishment of the powerhouse, we typically recommend that the owner purchase the equipment directly. That way there's direct control over the selection of the equipment. You could also bundle that into a general construction contract and have the general contractor select that equipment. We don't recommend that approach because, again, we won't have quite the level of control over the equipment selection. And with the powerhouse, it's really all about the equipment selection. So this is how we've kind of developed things out, where we would help you go out and buy that equipment. It will then be supplied to a general contractor in a subsequent contract. Next slide.
I have a question. So on the previous slide, it talked about further engineering. Let's see here. Can we go back, Carl, or did we go back?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So engineering to optimize, further engineering analysis. So does that further engineering analysis look at all those items on that list?
Yes.
Okay.
All those components will be studied. We would want to make sure that there aren't some optimizations that couldn't be done with the installed capacity of the equipment. Like I say, we didn't see in our first level analysis of the intake modifications that the installed capacity is somehow wrong and could be improved upon, but it was a fairly short and simple study for the purpose of the intake.
Okay.
But as a part of the engineering to go out and buy the equipment, we want to make sure we're sizing it right and that it's the appropriate type of arrangement. So we've done a fair amount of study on that already just to get our pricing well defined.
Okay.
But we definitely want to do some more to really get good comfort that we're buying the right equipment, because once we buy it, you can't give it back.
Right.
We're stuck with it.
Right. Thank you.
You bet. This is a continuation again of the contracting approach. Would be after we have bought the equipment, we get drawings and design about that equipment. We can then put that into a contract for a construction contractor to come out and do the demolition of the existing equipment and install the new equipment. And again, it's better if you have good drawings, electrical schematics, and all the concrete work in advance, because then you can get good bids for that work. Like I say, we would want to assist them with the contract management, construction management, and help with startup and commissioning. Just to make sure that it's... Next slide. One too many. Penstock repair. Again, we took this as 2 different contracts. Penstock repair, we would want to go and do a detailed inspection of the interior of the penstock, make sure there's no surprises. Bob Simke thinks it's in pretty good shape based on some of his experience on the lower end when they had to replace some of it. But we do want to make a good inspection to make sure there's no surprises there. And if necessary, you could go in and replace some sections of the piping if that's necessary. But we just don't know what it looks like right now because there's been nobody looking in there.
Is that, and probably that's a question also for Carl, but is that something that should be done before we make a decision on which way to proceed with the ROV inspection?
We're recommending that it be done early, certainly before we get into putting together contract documents, because we don't want to get into it and then find we have a problem. We've got a contractor already out there, but it's change order time. And we'd rather have this stuff all bid and engineered out in advance. So I think it is important to do that early in the cycle. We'd like to pick up some survey work at the same time, so we know where things are. The project suffers from a lack of existing as-built drawings. We have 1950s R.W. Beck drawings of the project that in some places are representative of what was built, in other places there's alternatives, and we aren't sure exactly what's out there. So things like knowing where the couplings all are, where the pedestals all are located at, there's none of that type of information. So we think both the ROV inspection and some survey work will help with getting the contract documents prepared and defining the scope of work for that contractor. And as we all know, getting those things done before is much better than finding out about them later. When change orders come in, they can be quite expensive. Again, this would all be competitively bid work. And, you know, this contract here, this could be work in the rail area could be able to mobilize for and perform work. Next slide. So in summary, we figured that the powerhouse refurbishment contract is about $5.3 million. Schedule a couple of years to 3 years, depending on when it starts. Work like this has to be done in the summertime, so you can lose a year at a chunk, depending on when you start the work. The powerhouse refurbishment probably require an outage of the powerhouse itself of about 5 months. So I mean, this is a significant issue. We'll try to make sure that we've got the equipment on hand so it all comes in and goes in as quickly as possible. But to demolish the old stuff and put in the new stuff is going to take some time. We think it's 4 to 5 months. In stock, again, about $2 million, a couple years, depending on when you start the work. Outage duration is a little more difficult here, depending on how it's prosecuted. And we know we have issues with outages on the penstock because the hatchery needs the water, and we have a license requirement to supply water. So there'll have to be some work done to figure out what the real outage durations will be. It may be that the contractor that's doing the work will have to pump water over the spillway and down Crystal Creek to supply the hatchery. All of that's got cost implications that still have to be worked out. So we're going to actually talk with Sarah a little bit about that. Again, these are initial cost estimates. We did go out to contractors on the powerhouse refurbishment work and get some pretty good responses from them based on very little information, still very conceptual in nature, but it gave us enough comfort level to think that these numbers are in the ballpark. They will be refined as design advances. Again, they're still pretty conceptual numbers based on very little hard design at this point in time. As I said before, you would want us to coordinate these two projects. You don't want to have two outages of this magnitude. So the real plan, next slide, would be to put these projects together, go out and buy the equipment for the powerhouse, get the powerhouse design done and the penstock repair design done, and then award a single contract to do both the powerhouse refurbishment work and the penstock refurbishment work with a single outage so that you minimize lost production and issues with the hatchery. Still about the same cost. We figure it's about $7.3 million total. Might be some benefits to coordinating these two contracts. That's a little early to say what, if any. Again, we will be advancing design, and then we can advance the costs as we go forward as well. Next slide. I won't get into the schedule, but I've got some printouts, and as I talked about purchasing equipment, that takes about a year to get equipment procured and delivered, maybe a little more than that. And in that time, then you can be doing the final design on the powerhouse with good information from the vendor, as well as getting the penstock design finished so that you could issue a construction bid package and award a construction job for doing the powerhouse and penstock work in one contract and do it all in one season.
Question. On the deeper siphon, how much engineering work would go into that? I was thinking of added alternatives. You know, that kind of approach of designing it, and putting it in there as an alternative to the bids?
I don't have the number on the top of my head, Stephen, but it is in the alternative development report. We put together a cost estimate for that, and I think included in the $1 million was our engineering effort. It's not a big engineering effort. What's typically done with these types of designs at other projects is you bring in HDPE pipe, and you bring it in sections that the helicopter can handle, because that's your only access up there, and then you weld that with a fusion machine on some floating barges as you go out there, and then you sink it. And so it's not real complicated in terms of engineering, but it's more complicated in terms of site issues and construction issues, because, again, you got to do it in the summer, and you got to get it in place before the snow flies. So,
All right, thank you.
and it has an outage probably around it, but not as bad. They get all that in and then couple it up to the dam and do that outage for a short period of time.
Do your engineers' estimates also include staging, because you're right, most of it has to be done by helicopter and so forth. Are those included in your estimates?
They are. The mobilization, obviously for the powerhouse refurbishment, it's not that difficult. You enjoy access of a jet service and barge facilities and a paved road. But when it gets to the penstock, it's a whole different story. Now everything's done through trails and a lot of helicopter support work. So numbers have been put in there. Like I say, I think we need to better refine that scope of work with the Municipal Power and Light staff and make sure that we've got that well identified. And we need to do this preliminary assessment work with the ROV, and I think get the land survey work performed to really flush all that out and make sure that we've got all the costs covered. We have some control there about what we do. It's not like the powerhouse. Say you're taking out the equipment, putting it new, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. With the penstock, we can decide when some things get done or some things don't get done. But we don't have a lot of details around that design at this stage, as it's, again, very conceptual and deep in nature right now. I think it's good to make sure that we cover those costs.
Don, have you got a breakdown on what it was going to cost for the ROV to go down and check out the penstock? Have you got a breakdown of all these different sort of preliminary projects that we need to do?
Yes, we've been talking with vendors. This is fairly specific, specialized work with the ROV. I talked with 2 vendors already and gotten some preliminary numbers. We figured it was going to be around $50,000 for the ROV work itself. It's probably something less than that for the land survey work, and probably work that can be performed by local land surveyors. But those are some of the initial ones. We tried to go through where we could and get some budgetary numbers from vendors to help us with flushing out these costs. You all know how difficult it is to estimate costs in Alaska, and we've seen some bad examples of it, unfortunately, and we're trying our best with this project to make sure that we've captured as many of those costs now and give you a good number. But like I say, we got to get the design a little further along before we really have high level of confidence in numbers. Pretty early. Next slide. I've got a bunch of pictures. Maybe we'll just run through these real fast. I don't know how many of you have been out there, but I encourage you to go out. It's quite an interesting facility. It's quite historic. Well, I guess that's the best way to put it. But we can just flash through these pretty quickly. The governor is a classic Woodward governor. Very difficult for us today to maintain because we just don't have people that know how to do it. Next. It has pressure tanks that are pressure vessels that have to be maintained and checked to make sure that they're not going to blow up. They are a pressure vessel. Next. There's skids with all kinds of equipment from 1955 on them that amazingly have done so well over the decades, but like I say, I don't think you can count on that going on forever. Next. This is what I talked about. We have a little bit of an arc flash hazard around some of the neutral grounding equipment for the generator that's right in the room there and not inside of a metal clad enclosure. Next. Classic old control panel with the old meters and the old relays. There have been some embellishments and improvements over the years with EPS yes, doing some work for the PMPL on making upgrades, allowing remote control and operation. Next, penstock, pretty impressive. All penstocks are impressive, but some of these remote penstocks are truly challenging in terms of ability to maintain them and to really walk them and inspect them. And as our workforce ages, I'm one of those, it's a little more challenging for us to get out and do that kind of work. Bob's pretty sprightly, and Jed's young, but I do worry about these kinds of projects where they're out in the bush and getting hurt. You can see the old penstock on the side here with the wire wrap, the wood. Next. Again, these are a series of pictures just showing you the difficulty of doing maintenance on this type of. It's elevated in quite a few locations, virtually no access to get up on the penstock. And frankly, I think some of the practices for maintenance have been a little unsafe. Somebody falls down off of there, they could get seriously injured. Next. Like I said, pretty difficult. You got trees on each side. They brushed a lot of the right-of-way and made it a little safer, but you worry about trees falling on your steel penstock. Next. There's unknown conditions on some of the supports. Again, we don't have good as-builts. Some of it looks to have been a bit jury-rug and maybe a little questionable in terms of its ability to withstand a seismic event. Next. Hardware is being in rust because it wasn't always protected as well as perhaps it should be, and you can see some degradation on the coating of the penstock on the exterior. Next. Again, pretty steep terrain in quite a few locations. Maybe a choker setter is used to doing this kind of work, but a lot of power plant people maybe not quite so comfortable with that kind of work. Next. There's been some real deterioration on some of the concrete supports from freeze-thaw type action, and Bob and crew have done good jobs of patching it, but that's about what it is. It's just a patch. It's not really restoring the strength. And we don't even know what the design was really based on. Next. More details on some of the deterioration. Next. Again, some of them are pretty elevated runs with deteriorating concrete supports. Next.
Hey, Don, real quickly, so that's steel penstock. What's the schedule on that pipe?
It's about a 20-inch pipe, and it's probably like a Schedule 40 in
pretty thin.
Modern days, about 0.4 inch thick. Bob did have some spot thickness measurements made last year with an ultrasonic testing outfit that came out, just to give us a better sense of what's it's like, and it was encouraging. We didn't see anything real bad, but we only made about a dozen spot measurements.
With an ROV inspection of that, will we also have a chance to, I know we'll inspect the inside, know what it looks like from it, because I've been involved with one before, but will we also be able to see any kind of weaknesses in the pipe from the inside?
This is a pretty small pipe. They have some very sophisticated ROV packages, some that can do ultrasonic testing along the way, some that can do side scan radar and profiling like they did at Tai. But this is a pretty small pipe for getting much more than a video. I wish I could say that we could get more, but I think we're going to be probably stuck with just looking at visual inspection criteria for this. And then if we see some areas that look concerning, then we could come back in with some UT inspection to check and see if there's been loss of material. Like I say, we don't think that's what's going on there based on what Bob's told us and what we've seen so far, but we want to make sure we know what we're getting into once we do the repair. Next. Again, a lot of structural steel supports. Some of them, if you were a structural engineer, you'd look at this and say this isn't properly supported. The stiffeners aren't in the right location. There's not enough of them. And it would probably buckle that I-beam if there was a significant event. Fortunately, those events don't happen very often. We're not a real high seismic area here, but generally when we do modern design, we have a lot of factors of safety to make sure things won't fall down in a ground shaking event. Next. Again, more pictures of some of the corrosion with the hardware and the buildup of mosses, and inevitable. But important to try and keep up with the maintenance of these things to keep them clean. And as you can imagine, trying to get out there and really do that kind of work in the summer during a short period of time is challenging for the maintenance crew. And it's not that they don't try, and they do a very good job, but it's very difficult to do this kind of work. Next. Some modifications that were made some years ago when the penstock came apart. So there's some concerns that some of the initial design was maybe acceptable in its day, but maybe isn't really quite adequate in terms of today's modern practices to have enough integrity to handle events. Next. Again, just more pictures of how steep the slope is going down to the powerhouse here and the kind of conditions that they have to try and do maintenance under. Next. The bypass valve and the valves going off to the other equipment are manually operated. They're very difficult to operate at all. I think Bob has told me that it's very challenging to try and close off any of these valves. And this is the valve, I think, that will provide bypass flow in case the unit goes offline. Next. Danger ahead. I guess that shows you the steep run, a little overly dramatic perhaps, but the reality is we think there's some need for some access improvements to facilitate better and easier and safer maintenance. I think that's it. Questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're talking about a project that, when it's all said and done, will be about anywhere from $7 to $11 million. Has there been any discussion about possibly getting more electrical generation out of Crystal Lake, like increasing, if we're talking about, we're having troubles with hydroelectric, would this be the opportunity or the time to have that discussion about increasing the generation coming out of there?
Yes, that's been a key part of what we looked at, and hence one of the reasons we're recommending a replacement of the turbine with the two-jet arrangement, because just efficiency alone will give us another 10 to 13% more generation. And as a part of our initial preliminary engineering effort, we want to look further at making sure that the sizing is right. And that takes a fair amount of hydrologic analysis to come up with what the inflows are and how the reservoir is operated to make sure that this plant is properly sized. I have to tell you, I think it is pretty close because of the fact that it doesn't spill very much. We did see some evidence of 10 to 15 days of spill in a couple of years, but that's not very much. A typical hydro project would expect to spill that amount because you don't want to build it so big to capture every bit because it's expensive. But you don't want to be undersized either because then you're wasting potential energy. So it's a bit of an optimization game that we want to do a little more work on. So yeah, there is some additional work. We're pretty pleased with where we got for this initial effort in kind of bracketing our costs, determining the scopes of work, and what the schedules might look like for the borough. But there's more to be done for sure.
Go ahead. If any questions, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So Don, right now we've got just you said it's about single jet or something, and then you're talking about the twin jet. Sure. What's the difference in cost in buying a new twin jet turbine versus rebuilding this one?
Rebuilding, we got some proposals from a couple suppliers for that, and like I mentioned, it didn't look like it would increase generation at all. Mm-hmm. It would extend the life, more than likely, of the unit, but again, it wouldn't pass any more flow, and the sizing of that unit and its single jet arrangement doesn't provide a lot of opportunity for increased generation by just refurbishment of it. That's why we started looking at replacement of it with a two-jet type machine, and we even looked at a four-jet vertical arrangement because we had a vendor thinking that they thought that might be a better arrangement. But the four-jet machine can operate over a much broader range, but we're limited on the low end by the hatchery requirements in the license. So I think it's 8 or 9 CFS is kind of our minimum delivery that we're supposed to be making. Now, this year, maybe we're not quite doing that, but that's through a special arrangement with the hatchery and everybody notified, but
So if we did decide to put the new turbine on, we're not going to use the old generator, we're going to put a new generator on there, or we're just...
yeah, the old generator, to get it rewound, is like $500,000, and it's got a bunch of risks. If we take it apart and find there's other issues, then we're going to be in the middle of an outage trying to figure out how to get those other issues solved. That, plus the fact that it's got a brush arrangement on it that creates a lot of dusting problems, and a very old-style rotating commutator type exciter, which requires occasional undercutting and cleanup on it, indicated to us that the better and more cost-effective approach was pure replacement of that generator. It also allows the supplier of the turbine generator to match the speed better. Right now, the speed is 600 RPM, and for the size of unit that we want to fit in there, a higher speed unit is recommended by these suppliers to give you a more efficient range of operation of the turbine. So all those factors spoke to the benefit of replacing the generator as opposed to refurbishing it. Not uncommon to refurbish it, as you know, that was what was done at Tyee. But in this case here, with a need or a desire to replace the turbine, there were some benefits to increasing the speed to get it to be a more efficient arrangement.
I believe this might be my last question. So how many megawatts is this one currently at, and what would be the new...
This is a little under 2 megawatts currently. New one's going to be right about the same size, subject to our further study. But with 2 jets, it's much more efficient. These machines have an efficiency curve, and they look pretty peaky when it's a single jet machine. With a multiple jet, you have a family of curves that superimpose, and they give you a much broader range of operation. And this year was sort of an example of the benefit of having that second jet to get a broader range of operation, as we're, a drought year, essentially. We're running with much lower flows. And so during this whole period of time, instead of running at like 25% efficiency, which is probably what you're doing, you'd be running at 50 or 60% efficiency during this period of time. So that's the benefit of the multiple jet arrangement, is you do get this broader range. Does that answer?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The footprint, if we change the turbine, are we going to have to change the footprint in there? In other words, do a major refit of that?
We've been just looking at that. I just got some AutoCAD files from a couple of the equipment manufacturers so we could lay it in there. I wanted to make sure we're going to fit it without having to raise the roof or knock the building down or what have you. And it looks pretty good. It's actually, with a higher speed generator, it's going to be a more compact generator. There'll be quite a bit more room in the powerhouse. Not that it's necessarily needed, but it isn't all bad. But it does look like we can fit it into the existing pit. And that's kind of my big concern, is if we have to start changing the pit and the tail race going out by the hatchery, that's going to get to be some expensive site work to do. We're hoping to avoid that and get that case to fit on that existing hole. It looks possible based on the information they gave us. Again, it needs more design analysis to really confirm it, but it does look encouraging right now.
And the staging, I'm sure you've looked at that as part of the whole process. I was thinking staging also in terms of laying it out such that all our costs aren't at one time, but I'm sure we'll have to do something with bonding or something else to be able to do this. I'm way ahead of myself here, but I'm sure you've looked at the staging too, and I agree with you that it all probably should be done at one time if we were going to do that.
Yeah, the schedule we built for the combined project that we talked about at the end would allow you to stage out your expenses, because the first would be some preliminary engineering, which isn't big money, but then you go buy equipment, and you don't pay for all the equipment in one lump sum. You pay over time as they do their work. So over about a year, you will pay for the turbine generator equipment, and the final payment will be when it's delivered and then started up and commissioned. And then the other work would be yet another year down. When you bring in the equipment, you now install it. So that contract would be the next phase of payments, and that would be done over the course of about a year as well. You'd have some preliminary payments to that contractor to get them started, get them mobilized, and then once they're on site and starting to do the work, you'd be paying them on a monthly invoice basis. So we would be able to line out a pretty good prediction of what the costs will be over time based on that approach with the information we even have today. And then we'll refine that as we get further along in the engineering and contracting as well. But yeah, it's not like you're going to have one big payment. You're going to have payments over a period of about 3 years.
Okay. And when we're all done, my last question, when we're all done, have we estimated what our per kilowatt cost would be then? I know it's about 1 cent now, 1 plus, but what would it be at the end?
I have not done an analysis with a new bond cost, and we'll have to work with you guys to develop that cost. Obviously, it's going to increase because you're going to go from a debt-free project and just its operating costs, which have been very reasonable, to now servicing debt as well. So we've got to decide how much debt you're going to need to take on and what those payments will look like, and then I can roll it into an analysis that'll show us what those costs should be.
Thank you.
You mentioned that it was going to be $500,000 to rewind the old generator or the current one. But I didn't catch what was going to be the cost of the new generator and the turbines.
The new, what I've got right now is a kind of an equipment proposal for a turbine generator and electrical equipment package. Those were running for the whole package about $1 million. So the fact that it cost just $500,000 to rewind it, to me, spoke pretty eloquently to the fact that it's better just to buy the whole package.
So it would be $1 million for all of it, including the controls and.
Yeah. So the trouble with rewinds is you got to mobilize people out. Generally, you want to do it on site if you can, because it's shorter time frame than taking stuff out and shipping it somewhere and getting it back. Although they did that at Tyee, but either way, it's a long haul. So you got a longer outage that you have to coordinate. So, like I say, it seemed like I won't call it a no-brainer, but it was close to a no-brainer when we saw the equipment package prices. But good question. Like I say, I know it. I was a little surprised at Tyee that they paid Magnatech to ship it all the way back east and do the work and then ship it back. But that was the approach they took. I don't know why, but that's not. It's not an inconsequential process in its own right. This smaller generator, obviously.
Mr. Jarrett, thank you so much for the detailed presentation today. Are there any further questions for Mr. Jarrett today? Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
we have show and tell back there if you can look at any of the documents you paid for, and they'll be always available to you through Steve and Carl.
Much appreciated, sir, of course. Moving on. Clerk Thompson, I was supposed to remind you to read something. Did I miss there?
No, you have not missed it. It's under the fireworks discussion.
Yeah, cool. I wrote down to ask you, but I forgot to put it where. All right. That will take us to the mayor's report. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and by way of proclamation, Vice Mayor Stanton Greger and the Assembly join communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual violence. I'll read the proclamation here into the record. Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and impacts every person in this community. The goal of Sexual Assault Awareness Month is to raise public awareness about sexual violence and educate communities on how to prevent it. Rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment harm our community, and statistics show 1 in 5 women and 1 in 67 men will be raped at some point in their lives. Child sexual abuse prevention must be a priority. To confront the reality that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls will experience sexual assault before age 18. On campus, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted during their time in college. The theme of this year's Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign is I Ask. The campaign champions the power of asking for consent, whether it be asking to hold someone's hand, or permission to share personal information with others, if a partner is interested in sex. Consent is a clear, concrete example of what it takes to end sexual harassment, abuse, and assault. The goal of the campaign is to empower everyone to put consent into practice. I ask is a statement by which individuals will demonstrate that asking for consent is a healthy, normal, and necessary part of everyday interactions. The Petersburg Borough Assembly joins advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual violence. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and each day of the year is an opportunity to create and change for the future. Okay. And just a reminder on energy conservation, even though we're running on hydro again, the weather forecast does show some rain on the horizon, likely. But I'm going to briefly read a few suggestions that Carl had put out for conserving energy, because just because hydro is rolling doesn't mean we shouldn't be conserving. Water heating can account for 14 to 25% of the energy consumed in your home. Take shorter showers. Don't run hot water continuously. Wash clothes in warm or cold water. Turn down temperature of your water heater to 115 to 120 degrees. Check if your water heater has an insulating blanket. An insulating blanket will pay for itself in 1 year or less, but don't cover the tank thermostat during blanket installation. Take showers with low-flow shower heads. They use 50% less hot water instead of baths. Run only full loads in your dishwasher and clothes washers. Survey your incandescent light for opportunities to replace them with compact fluorescent CFLs or LED lights. CFLs can save 3/4 of the electricity used by incandescents, and LEDs can save even more. Turn off your lights in occupied rooms, or consider installing timers, photocells, or occupancy sensors to reduce the amount of time your lights are on. And this one was put on there for February. Put away your holiday lights and save them for next year. That's all I've got for the mayor's report. I'll pass it over to you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, sir. Congratulations to Chief Doug Weldy. He retired from the fire department effective March 6, 2019, after 50 years with the fire department. I had 50 years in 1 month, actually. Thanks for your service, Doug. The volunteers will be electing a new chief on April 4th. 11 search and rescue volunteers are now certified as wilderness first responders and emergency trauma technicians. We also had 7 EMS volunteers spend 24 hours in a refresher course as part of their EMT recertification process. 5 of the volunteers recertified as EMT2 and 2 volunteers recertified as EMT3s. Firefighter recruit class started in March. Classes are on Saturdays. Unfortunately, we only have 1 new member so far, but a couple of the current members are also taking the class. Thanks to First Bank, who contributed $3,000 to the 2019 summer reading program. This kicks off our annual spring fundraising for the program. Donations can be made at the library's website, in person at the library, or by mail. Friends of Petersburg Libraries will celebrate National Library Week, April 7th through the 12th, with an open house at their book sale on April 6th and a public awareness campaign about the services offered by the borough or the library. You're all probably aware we came off of diesel on Sunday, March 24th, after warmer weather. Got some inflows from snowmelt, brought the Tyee Lake elevation above 1265. The level will be watched very closely, and there may still be a chance that additional diesel runs will be necessary this spring. As the Mayor Pro Tem said, conservation of power is still important to the community and for reducing the draft rate in Tyee Lake as much as possible. Even though we are not running diesels now, conservation will help to ensure we don't have to turn the generators back on this spring. Harbor maintenance staff is working on decking in the South Harbor for a viewing platform. This should help alleviate some congestion from the visitor industry's summer harbor tours. Also, with the warmer weather, the harbor spring cleaning began a little bit earlier this year. Water is on at the grids, and parking lots are getting cleared from winter sand and gravel. Per the request from the Assembly, the Planning Commission met on March 19th and March 26th to review the industrial portion of the Development Code. They plan to hold at least 1 more public hearing on April 9th, and they're currently scheduled to vote on a revised industrial code on May 14th. The PEDC Visitor Industry Working Group is meeting over the next month. This group is seeking a representative from the hotel, B&Bs, commercial fishing, and seafood processing industries. The meeting times are all from 2 to 3 in the Assembly chambers, April 8th, April 15th, and April 29th. The state ombudsman was in Petersburg for a visit at assisted living a couple weeks ago. It's really nice, as always. They really enjoyed the facility. The manor, including elderly housing, is expecting 3+ inspections over the next several months. So getting a good start at having a good sign-off was nice. Sheila and I have completed speaking to various consultant firms to see who might be a possible choice to look at assisted living. We should have a recommendation to the Assembly by the first meeting in May. Assisted living now has 18 apartments. 2 are still independent with 21 residents. Upcoming events at Parks and Rec, Scoop the Poop at Sandy Beach, Sunday, April 14th. All are invited to join us for an afternoon of cleaning up, 1 to 3 with a barbecue afterward. The Ducky Dive is April 20th. We will be offering our yearly Ducky Dive again this April to have some fun in the pool. More information to follow. And swim lessons with Asia starting April 1st through May 20th. Registration is available now. The next Friends of Parks and Rec meeting will be held on Wednesday, April 17th at 5 p.m. in the director's office upstairs. Huge thank you to all who have put forth time and effort. If anyone is interested in joining the group, you are invited. After several months of compiling projects and ideas, the group has decided to move forward with a couple of directions, including a mini Frisbee golf course along the City Creek Trail, cleaning, replacing, and updating the Eagles Roost stairwell. We're trying to get quotes currently on how much that will cost. And replacing the showers with auto shut-off in the men's and women's poolside locker rooms. The goal of this is to reduce water and electric waste. The showers, unfortunately, are often left on by some of our younger members of the community. So, Cody has been doing a great job catching up on our maintenance job tasks at the pool and Parks and Rec. We've had multiple items break down over the last several months, and he has been working diligently to work through solutions to the problems. This includes the pool control units, which is how we control the chlorine and pH levels. Both of the units have broken down over the last month. The HVAC system, we've had multiple motors have gone offline, belts broken, sensors not working, and Cody's working with the software system to bring them to town to inspect all of our sensors. Also been catching up on regular maintenance activities on all the HVAC systems by replacing filters, greasing the joints, and so forth. We have an issue with the bubble couch in the leisure pool, which will not hold pressure, and we still have a leak in the in-floor radiant heating near the front desk. We did get the elevator serviced when the sensors went bad and got the elevator tech here. And we're installing an emergency exit crash bar on the back pool doors to meet the fire marshal needs. They are working with volunteer firefighters, search and rescue, and the Forest Service to install a 3-panel informational kiosk at the Sandy Beach parking lot adjacent to the Ravens Roost Trail. The kiosk was built by volunteers and is scheduled to be placed at the Sandy Beach in the middle of April. And with some help from maintenance and volunteers, we cleared out bushes and trees at Eagles Roost to increase light to the stairs and to increase visibility from the roadside to increase safety. That's it. I read that as fast as I could. So.
Well played, Mr. Manager. Any questions for Steve? Right on. For that, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break before we continue. We'll reconvene at 1:18. All right, we'll continue. There is no unfinished business today, which brings us to item 15, new business. Ordinance number 19-02, an ordinance amending Chapter 4.28 titled Sales Tax of the Borough Code regarding the collection of sales tax on internet sales. If adopted, ordinance 2019-02 will update the sales tax code to add language to include internet sales of goods and services. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Marall. Discussion. Member Norheim, go ahead.
I guess is this for local businesses or I guess what is this?
I'll let the Finance Director take that. I saw you reaching for a mic. Go right ahead, Jody.
No, local businesses, if they sell things online, they should already be collecting sales tax because they have a business located in Petersburg. This is just to broaden the language of the sales tax code for internet vendors not located in Petersburg, maybe not even located in Alaska, to allow them to voluntarily collect sales tax if they want to. And it doesn't actually, our code currently doesn't exempt them from doing this, but our attorney thought it would be a good idea to add a little bit more verbiage into our sales tax code to encompass, in light of internet sales. And we have started collecting some internet sales tax from Amazon is one, and so we thought that this would be a good time to just update it.
That's your question, Member Norhan?
Yeah, so this basically just kind of like allows Amazon to give us those sales tax?
Yes, I mean, our code wasn't disallowing it, but it didn't specifically mention it, because right when this code was written, I mean, there probably wasn't internet sales yet, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of like the first step in letting us go after these companies.
It is, but until our state has a unified sales tax code, we can't mandate online vendors to collect sales tax on behalf of the borough.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, how do you know that Amazon is, or any other online retailer is submitting the sales tax that they charge to local residents? How do we know that?
Well, we actually, a lot of word of mouth, people saying, hey, I've been charged sales tax from this vendor. We make sure that they're remitting. And then, we see who's remitting. We were kind of had our eyes filled waiting for Amazon, and they submitted last month, and I'm expecting one any day now from them. I've had other people, say, hey, this company is doing it. And so we kind of just wait and give them a month, and if we don't see anything, then we call them. But there's really not a ton that we can do because it is voluntary. So people should just look, when you buy something online, look and see if you're being collected or being charged sales tax, and let us know.
Thank you.
No. Just this is an ordinance, so it'll have 3 readings, and next one will be the public hearing. So anyone with thoughts on the matter, I encourage you to turn up for it. Any further discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Excellent. Passes unanimously, which brings us on to Resolution 2019-05. Resolution in support to full funding, $7,409,439 for the State of Alaska Municipal Harbor Facility Grant Program and that fiscal year 2020 state capital budget. The Harbor Board requests the Assembly support full funding for the State of Alaska Municipal Harbor Facility Grant Program in the capital budget. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Then moved by Member Woolhooter and seconded by Member Morrell. Discussion. Member Mucci.
I have just one question, Mr. Mayor. Is this something that all the communities in Alaska are doing, or is this something that just Petersburg in specific is doing?
Ms. Wallen, do you care to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's kind of organized by the Municipal Harbor grant funding is something that's out there for all the communities that have harbors. And so the Association of Harbor Masters works closely on this, and communities that have benefited in the past or future to benefit usually weigh in. So most of coastal communities do.
Thank you.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, when I read the resolution, you've already chosen which municipalities in Alaska will get those grants, or which ones offered up the money, essentially. So what we're essentially doing then is supporting those communities. Is that
right? Exactly. Wrangell got pretty much the whole ball of wax last year.
Yes.
And from my own perspective, it seems quite important to be supporting this, and I'll definitely be voting to approve this resolution today. Any further discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. Bring us on to item number C, 19-132, Scow Bay 1 Pump Station Rehabilitation Project Contract Amendment. Utility Director Hagerman is requesting approval of a contract amendment with P&D Engineers to fund required professional services on the Scow Bay 1 Pump Station Rehabilitation Project through construction and close out with ADEC. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion.
Just one question for Carl.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Carl, so P&D is the only one that's capable of doing this scope of work?
No, they're not, but this is an amendment to an existing contract that we have with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Member Mucci, I saw your hand up there.
No, thank you.
Pat?
Yes, sir.
Carl, is there anything you'd want people at home to know about this right now?
The project, we actually started this quite a while ago, the design process, and it did get derailed as I put in my memo to the manager and assembly. But we're back on track and really pushing hard to get this work done in this construction season. So this amendment will allow final design to be procured, permitting to be secured, and moving forward with the bid and construction this year.
Thanks, Director Hagerman. Further discussion. Member Lynn.
Yeah, just a question. When you get, I was looking at the contract phase services here. Will you have a set of as-bills when you're done then with this, with the money that we're adding to it?
Oh, yes, yeah.
That answers the question, Member Lynn?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Further discussion or questions from the Assembly? Clerk, call the roll, please.
Bob,
Yes.
Brandy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff, Kurt.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Excuse me. Brings us to 19-135. Letter to Governor Dunleavy regarding his roadshow. Vice Mayor Stanton Gregory requested a letter to Governor Dunleavy be drafted regarding the governor's roadshow traveling to Alaskan communities to explain his proposed 2020 budget, failing to schedule a trip to Southeast Alaska. I entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
And moved by Member Woolhooter and seconded by Member Norhan. Discussion. Member Lynn.
Yeah. I agree with the speaker earlier that I've looked at their website, and the process is so controlled in what they're doing. I don't think it really represents what we would want to do here in Petersburg. I think it needs to be more open so that people have a chance to talk to the governor and not controlled. And so I can't support that letter going to the governor. And if you remember, we also invited the governor, I think, for Mayfest. So we may have a chance along those lines also to, if he were willing to come, to let people ask the governor's questions about the budget, et cetera. So with that, that's kind of where I end up with it.
Understood. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Karen. I mean, I think if we were going to invite the governor down to kind of talk about his budget, it would be nice if we could do it without the group that is organizing, what do they call them?
AFP?
Yeah, without having those folks involved. I think what we're concerned about is just having an open dialogue with the governor and his staff of hired hitmen to come down here and explain what they want to do and listen to what the community of Petersburg is thinking about his budget. While we have sent a letter to him, invited him down for the Mayfest celebration. That's kind of a busy time, and I think it would be good to invite him down here on a specific date that works with his schedule, just to talk about those issues. And I'd kind of like to, maybe when this letter gets submitted, maybe just make a suggestion that we don't invite the AFP group to be part of it, just the governor and his staff. So that's kind of, I don't know if we need an amendment to this letter or we can talk about it, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing in all fairness in terms of content as far as when we originally came up with this idea, his roadshow as it is. We didn't really know what that played out in, and as we have learned, it's not an interactive form, and it hasn't been. We've all read the news, a lot of us have, and where some places only written comments are taken beforehand. Either way, hasn't been a back and forth. I would most certainly be in favor of changing the language to stress we want it to be an interactive time for the community to engage with the governor. Would that work for something like that for you, Member Lynn?
Yeah, as long as it's not controlled, and that our publics here have a chance to talk, to the governor.
Yeah. Somewhere along the lines of language of like unrestricted public access or some version, or removing the AFP from it, something along those lines. Something like that would jive with you?
Yes.
Yeah, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree. I think we should, when we send this letter, we should specifically say we don't want the AFP group part of it. I mean, we can certainly make those requests known to the governor. I mean, those people can show up as members of the public and participate as well, but I think we need to make sure, and we need to specifically say we don't want them to be part of a public hearing if the governor chooses to bless us with his participation here.
Yeah, 1 second, Member Norheim. Do we need to do this in the form of amendment, or can we just flush it out like this and approve it and just vote on it at the end, Clerk Thompson?
I think that your discussion is making the amendments, and so I don't think we have to vote on it as an amendment, and then I think it's okay.
I want to make sure parliamentary stuff was in line.
Yeah.
Member Norheim, you were waiting.
So my understanding was that these Americans for Prosperity organization is funding the road show, therefore that's the reason why they have these stipulations on it. Mm-hmm. So in order for him to come down here, are you saying that we would be taking money out of the borough budget to pay for that? Because that was his reason given for following their format, was they are paying for the whole thing. The state isn't paying for any of it, not the travel or anything, so he's sticking to their format to save the state money. Not that I like their format, but who's going to pay for him to come down here?
Well, if you would so choose to with the staff, then that would be on the staff. Of course, Petersburg would have no part of that. That was zero intention of mine.
Okay.
Clarified? Yep. Thank you, sir. Clerk Thompson, do you feel like you've got stuff to work with right now?
I do. I can certainly make amendments to this letter, and if you're comfortable with it, then send it, or I can bring it back at the next meeting, whatever you guys prefer.
And I'd feel comfortable if you included the part about open public access for dialogue and the AFP thing that Member Mucci wrote.
Mm-hmm. Got it written down.
Seem okay with the Assembly?
Yeah.
Excellent. Necklace with the clerk call the roll.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I was just a quick thought there. So we're just going to let Debbie revise this letter and then just send it off as it is if we approve this one here? Is that what we're getting at?
That's what I was asking, with Jay's signature, so he would be reading it over. Or I could bring it back to the next meeting on the 15th.
I think I'd prefer to have it come back to this next meeting myself so he could have a look at it. That way then it's all above board. I mean, the public can see what we're sending off instead of... So that would be just my own... I mean, I really like the idea, but I think I'd rather look at it before we send it off and make it public.
I'm fine with it, whatever, but the only real change we're making is saying, more or less politely saying the AFP isn't invited to this, we'd like to talk to you, and we want open access. The rest of the letter can stay the same, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So how do we need to do this? We need to clarify when it's supposed to be sent out, or if it needs to come back. How do you want to proceed, Clerk Thompson?
Well, if you'd like to amend it, if you would want to go ahead, Kurt, and make an amendment to have it brought back, to have it rewritten and brought back at the meeting on the 15th, then we can vote on that. How does that work?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to do that. I'd like to make an amendment that after the changes have been made, that we have an opportunity to let it to the public, put it on the agenda so the public can see it also, and then we can approve it at that point.
Second? Anybody second?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Discussion solely on the amendment. Seeing none, clerk call the roll, specifically on just the amendment to bring it back at the next assembly meeting.
Okay. Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
No.
Jay?
No.
Does not pass.
That is, 3-3?
Correct.
That brings us back to the main motion of the letter to Governor Dunleavy about his roadshow with the
Rewritten with
revisions
the...
discussed.
Correct.
Okay, so clarification there now.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jay. So now, if we vote on this, it's going to be with your amendments, and then we're just going to send it off.
Correct.
Okay, just so I know. Okay.
Good clarifier. Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it passes unanimously. Navigated that one. Which brings us to E19-136, North Harbor Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project. Utility Director Hagerman is requesting approval to negotiate with Eaton for the final terms of the North Harbor Advanced Metering Infrastructure System. After negotiations, an award recommendation will be brought before the Assembly for approval. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Wolhuter. Discussion. Member Morrell.
I was just wondering, funds, do we have them secured for this project? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, we have a capital project fund for this project, and there are funds in that capital fund, amount equal to $145,000 in that account.
That answers the question, Member Morrell?
Yeah, and this is going to be installed by your staff, or is this?
Yet to be determined. It kind of looks like that we might go that way just to save costs. We, in the process of the evaluation of proposals, two of the vendors gave us a cost for installation, which was pretty high, much higher than it should be. So I'm kind of looking at it as definitely a negotiation point at this time, and we'll see what we can do. There are other resources in town, electricians that could probably do that work for us too if we didn't have the time, but most likely it'd definitely be a negotiated item.
Member Lynn.
Yes, Carl, when I read your recommendation, your letter, you have two breakouts there, cost proposal and annual fees. What does the annual fees include? What was the rationale? I didn't read it in the text.
Yeah, right. That's a good question. So the annual fees are more tied to the software. As we deploy the meters out in the harbor and beyond in future years, those report back to a server, and a piece of software has to manage that server and convert that data into information that can be shared with our utility billing system and our customer information system. And so that software is where the annual fees come in.
Thank you.
Member Wolhuter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Carl, can you tell us the advantage over doing it this way versus the way they've been doing it now?
Well, it's a huge time savings for staff. In the summer, every day practically, power and light staff has to go down to the floats to get a reading or turn a slip power off, take a meter, and it's a substantial amount of time spent on that, whereas this system, that work, a bulk of that work can be done from the office. These meters are capable of remote connects and disconnects, so it's as easy as punching a button at a terminal to take care of something that would take up to half an hour if it's at the end of a float, to collect a meter, go down there, install it, come back, report the information to staff in the office. So that's the primary advantage of this system. And the second is, and maybe more importantly, is that the reads will come in automatically. The meter reader won't have to walk the docks. We'll still have it in this process of setting up the system. We'll be getting readings from the system. I also want the meter reader to go and check the accuracy of the reads that we're getting. But at some point in time, we'll be satisfied that the system is working, and so we won't have to put that meter reader down the dock as often. We still would like them to take a tour every once in a while to make sure there aren't other issues going on. It's good to have a set of eyeballs look at every meter in town on a monthly basis to see where problems exist and things like that. But much less time spent for that down in the harbor after the system goes in.
Thank you.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we can do this in the harbor, is this something that can be done in the residential world?
Absolutely. And so that is something that, we're taking very baby steps because this is something that we haven't had in Petersburg before. So this project that we're looking at right now will install about 25 meters in the extents of all the harbors, middle, south, and north. And then the second phase of that, once that system is installed and working properly, we'll deploy all the meters in the North Harbor. And then hopefully, as if budget processes allow, we'll expand that to the middle and south harbors in the following year, and then slowly look at opportunity to branch out into large commercial customers in residential areas. These systems are really the way that the industry is going right now, and part of the reason that we're doing this in the harbor to begin with is because the technology that the meter reader uses to connect to each meter and get a quick reading at every stall is being thrown out by the industry. Optical reading is what we do now, and without it, it's what he does in every other household, looking at a number, punch it in, and of course there's room for error when you do that, and it takes more time. We thought that we could get around that and buy some equipment that would allow optical reading to continue in the harbor, but every turn we made, the vendors were saying, no, it's a dead technology. We don't even program that into our readers anymore. So this technology is something that virtually every utility is going to. It's very effective in not just reading meters and remote connects and disconnects, but a whole lot of power quality information can get sent back to the utility. Load management, just other bits of equipment can be put into our distribution system that will allow us to know what's going on out there. Outage reporting, for instance. If we had one of these meters at everybody's household, it would tell us. It would send us a message when there was no power, and so we know exactly where to go. That's something we don't have right now, but it's exciting to think about.
Answer your question, Member Mucci?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Member Woolhooter, you were waiting?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, so Carl, this 113,784, how many meters was that? 25, did you say? Or was that
166.
166, okay, thank you.
Further discussion or questions for Director Hagerman? Okay, clerk, call the roll.
Randy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it passes unanimously. Brings us to item F, 19-137 Fireworks Ordinance. Assemblymember Morrell requests to amend Borough Code to allow fireworks inside Service Area 1 on July 3rd and 4th and New Year's. The current fireworks ordinance is attached. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Morrell and seconded by Member Woolhooter. Discussion. Member Mucci, is that a handout I saw?
Yes, it was.
All right, just checking.
Not trying to hold my head up. I'm not quite sure where we're going with this ordinance, but if you look at it under definitions and stuff, it talks about torpedoes and sky bombs and sky rockets and M80s and all kinds of weird stuff that I didn't realize torpedoes were part of fireworks. But not, I think if we're going to look at allowing some dates for fireworks, I think we need to kind of look at maybe that whole part of the ordinance and look at the definitions and maybe clean that up a bit. I'd also like to see this go to the Public Safety Advisory Board, since they're kind of active. I heard they had a meeting either coming up or...
We just had one, or they just had one, but they'll have another.
Yep, but I'd like to see this, since we have advisory boards for certain things like this, or at least, if nothing else, give it to the Public Safety Advisory Board and have the police chief weigh in on this, just to kind of see the positive and negatives of doing this. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Clerk Thompson, 1 second. Member Morrell, could you read the chief's comments, please?
Yes, Chief Kerr was not able to be here today, but he did want me to let you guys know his input. Currently, there's no fine attached to the fireworks ordinance, so the only option is criminal charges of disorderly conduct if they go to a house that is lighting up fireworks and not supposed to. He doesn't believe this should be considered a criminal offense. So his opinion is we have a choice of one of two things. We could either make fireworks legal on the proposed days with time limits, a start time and an end time, each day, along with fines for violating the time limits and littering of fireworks if you don't clean up your mess. Or, number two, keep the fireworks ordinance the way it is currently, but institute fines. We could go either way. So currently, it's just not allowed within Service Area 1. But there are no fines attached for breaking the rules.
Okay. Member Rov, you're waiting patiently. Go right ahead.
I was going to say, I put this on there because it was suggested actually by the chief, so this is where I didn't just come up with this on my own. Anyway, and it was, I think that's kind of, he kind of wanted to, from what he said, he wanted some public input as well. So I'm not saying that we have to do anything right now. I was just throwing it out there because it was suggested to me, and I thought that, I think that there should be fireworks on a few days, and I like the idea of a timeline, but that's just where I stand on it.
Member Woolholder, I got you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is going to take 3 readings, so I'm going to vote for this just to kind of see what the input is from the community, and then if we need to pass it on down to the Public Safety Board before we make a final decision on it, I think we have plenty of time to do that. So I'm just going to see, curious how people feel about it. I'm never usually home during the 4th of July, so it doesn't affect me. So.
Understood. Thanks, Member Woolholder. Member Norheim.
There was one thing that was brought up to me. I think it was my dad said, well, if you make it legal, what if somebody's throwing firecrackers at people downtown? Is that legal? And I don't know, but I don't know if this is the time to amend something like this, like if you're just throwing it into the public advisory board. I don't know.
Harassment anyways.
Yeah, nothing about that would be okay, I imagine. Member Lynn.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I think we ought to go for a rewrite rather than to vote on it. Rewrite the whole ordinance. One of the things I looked at in here was to have in your possession. If I bought those outside of town, came to town, bought groceries, and took them back out, I'm in violation of the ordinance. And to me, possession needs to be looked at as part of this process. And I can tell you there's a lot of people in town have them, so there's a lot of people in violation. So, and that, the whole ordinance, I think, needs to be looked at in more detail.
Understood. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
So can we kick this to the Public Safety Advisory Board with the help of the chief to craft us a better document? And I'm still kind of weirded out by the torpedo thing. It's just kind of like the Crystal Lake was probably written in 1955. Yeah. And it was okay to use torpedoes for something, but I can't imagine what they would be for. So,
touche.
And what is a torpedo?
Yeah, quick clarifier, Member Mucci. So if we were to take that approach, Clerk Thompson, what would be the best way to go about it?
Well, if you guys would just ask me to write down on here that you would like it to go to the Public Safety Advisory Board, and then we take a vote and it passes, then that's what we'll do.
Change this thing to, send this to the... Mm-hmm. Got it. My 2 cents on this right now is, short answer is I agree with Member Mucci, and pretty much everyone has said on this that I think it would be great for public safety to take a look at that. That's what the board is for. From my perspective, this is a topic that I've gotten more feedback by phone and email from in a long time, mainly from 2 things. One, tying to what Chief Kerr said, the idea of okay, technically this is illegal now, but people do it anyway and there is no fine structure. Yeah, we need to put something in place. But the majority of feedback I've received is don't make any exceptions in Service Area 1 because my dog is going nuts. For real, it's what I've heard a lot of, and it's in a laundry list of other things, though. So I guess... Does anybody have an objection to sending this down to Public Safety to be looked at? So
to be rewritten? Is that
to be rewritten, crafted,
and crafted.
Giving us something to work with.
Yes.
Following the guidelines we've kind of talked about today. Does that work for you, Clerk Thompson?
It does.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the help of Chief Kerr or somebody from the police department.
Good clarifier, sir.
I would also suggest the fire department.
I would say fire department, too.
Yeah.
Thompson is taking notes on this. This is good. Yeah, that makes. I feel very comfortable with that. Any further discussion on that topic? Anybody want to clarify so we know what we're voting on? We all feel good? All right. Clerk, please call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously to send that to Public Safety with the various other parties involved. Brings us to item G, 19-138, Borough Performance Incentive Program. Manager Giesbrecht is seeking approval to begin the Borough Performance Incentive Program. Description of the program is attached. But I entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
We'll go with, perfect. Moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Morrell. And before we do discussion on this, I'd like to kick it to you, Mr. Manager, to people listening at home, just kind of give them an overview. And I know a lot of us have heard about this several times, but for people listening at home, if you would.
Sure. Many places have programs for their employees to submit ideas to potentially improve what you do. And especially in the world we're living in now where money is going to be really tight, putting a program like this in place would allow employees to come up with ideas on how we could save money. And we give them an incentive. I'll quickly do it. I'd keep department heads not eligible. And this tended to throw people a maximum payout of $5,000 per idea. But then really the payout is 5% of the net savings or the net revenue achieved over a one-year period. So, if an idea generates so much that 5% is $5,000, we're winning. So I wouldn't, my suggestion would be don't focus on that somebody could get $5,000. They generated $5,000, the borough's getting a lot of revenue or savings. The ideas would just be submitted. We'd have, a group both internally as well as involving the assembly to kind of vet those ideas, decide if they are, can be implemented, and we'd go through that process. We'd use Jody's expertise to make sure that the savings or revenue was legit and that, she thought it was achievable. And then we would look back a year later and say, okay, did it do what it was supposed to do? There's really not much risk for the borough in this. A little bit of upside for the employees and a lot of upside if we actually get good ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Discussion from the Assembly or question from the Manager? Member Lynn, please.
Just a question, Steve, back on where you say Borough Performance Incentive Program under your item 3 there. Was the 250 your low end of that? That was confusing to me, where you say here 5% of net savings, but then you say 250 or 5,000, whichever is less. I'm not sure.
Sorry, yeah. What I was trying to say there, if I may, is that we would, by the generation of an idea that we decide to implement, they're going to get $250.
That's minimum.
So, okay. And potentially up to 5,000. Okay. So high end is 5,000, low end is 250, and the actual calculation is 5% of whatever the savings is within that range. Okay. So I wanted to give people an incentive, and that even in a small area, let's say their idea only generates a small amount of savings, so 5% of it is less than 250. I would say, we reward them with the 250 for all the work that they go through. But again, that falls on the group, how they would look at this. So I wanted a minimum payout put in. That's what the 250 was.
Thank you.
Member Ruhlhoder.
Yeah, if my math is correct here, the $250 payout would be for something that saved $5,000. So.
Yeah. Right.
So, just so everybody kind of has an idea of that.
Again, these won't be big numbers, although it would be great if they were.
Of course, because they are big numbers, it means we've created great efficiencies for the borough.
Correct.
Absolutely. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is this are we just going to do it for a year to see how it works, or what are we thinking?
Programs like this usually have shelf life. Mm-hmm. You put them in place and people get excited, and for a while you get ideas. I would suggest that we run it as long as we're getting enough ideas to justify doing it. At a certain point in time, if it runs its course, we make a general announcement it's done for now. But that's just my suggestion.
Okay.
Member Mucci,
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I know this is for department employees, but what about, and I know it's not being talked about here, but what about including members of the public who might have an idea that could save a lot of money? Would they be eligible, or is that not?
This is purely internal at this point.
Okay.
If it goes to the general public, it costs us a little bit more to manage it. That may be what the Assembly wants, but I mean, we could go there.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? From my perspective, I think it's a great opportunity for employees to be, I don't know, just like the thing says, it's an incentive program. Someone with a good idea, creating an incentive for them to come forward and help make their workplace better and more efficient. So I'll definitely be voting for this. Clerk, please call the roll. Sorry, Member Wohlhuter.
I just want to say one more thing about April 1st here. If the general public does have a really good idea, they can run for the Assembly and make $150 every 2 weeks.
There you go.
So there would be their incentive for coming up with some great ideas. So,
well played, Member Wohlhuter. Clerk, please call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes, passes unanimously. Moves on to communications, none listed, and Assembly discussion items. A, 19-139 fish box tax, as Assembly Member Mucci requests discussion regarding a fish box tax. Copy of Sitka's fish box tax ordinance is attached. Member Mucci, since you put that on, do you want to lead us out?
I will attempt to.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is something I've talked about a year or so ago, and I'm going to continue to flesh this out a little bit, and I'm not quite sure if we're going to call it a tax or a fee. But Sitka does this, and I will try and bring this forward with more details, but the idea here is not to charge a fee for residents who live in Petersburg. If they're taking a box of fish down to their kids or family or whatever, they're taking it with them wherever they go. But the idea here is to charge a fee for folks who come to town and offload 20 or 30 boxes of fish and take it to the airport, and just some type of fee to kind of help the community out. So I will be bringing forward some more details on this at a later date.
Sounds good, Member Mucci. Yeah, we discussed that. What was that, Clerk Thompson? 2 years ago, and we discussed out-of-state fish box tax?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Two or three, I believe, yes.
Good. Look forward to discussion. Of course. Further discussion on the topic. Member Lynn.
Yeah, I think there's some question here, though, of equity. We have our own charter operators in here that operate. Then we have the lodges out the road that operate. And when I read this, there's a question in my mind, what do we call in a box? I watch some of them, come in with a box of fish. They're, just a small package. And I've seen them take them on the airplane. Are we charging for that? What size are we looking at? I think there's a lot of questions here in terms of equity that needs to be looked at.
Absolutely.
Particularly so that our local operators don't get, charge more than other people, so to speak.
That'd be a good part of the discussion.
Yep, I agree, Mr. Mayor.
Further thoughts on that discussion topic right now? Oh, yes, Member Norham.
I mean, I'd be for something like this, because then you get basically, for me and my dad out at our cabin, we can't catch halibut there anymore because we get unguided charter people have now set up shop right in front of the cabin where we used to just jig up halibut all the time. Well, they're not there anymore, and they've just moved out from there a little more. So I would be totally fine with instituting a fee for these people now that I can't catch halibut there.
Yep. Understood. Anything else? I look forward to seeing it on the agenda. Recognitions this afternoon. Go ahead. I guess I just have one. I'm sorry, Member Morrell, were you about to speak? Okay. As I was looking at Governor Dunleavy's budget, as lots of us have been, and its impact on our educational system, I just wanted to recognize the Petersburg School District, all the way from elementary through high school. It's something that I try not to take for granted, but we live in a small island on the edge of the ocean, and we have a dynamic public school district that is extremely valued from the top down, from Erica KP down to the kindergarten teachers. Like, we have really, really quality staff, and for those of us with kids, like, be mindful and grateful of what we've got, and that we are that lucky. The awards they receive are not flukes, they're that good. And if you're so inclined, please write your legislators to let them know how you feel about that. So just thanks, great work to the Petersburg School District. Any further recognitions?
Just one.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, thank Carl, the Power and Light guys, SEPA people, Bob Lynn, Robert Larson, the people who've kind of helped us kind of over this hump with the dry spell that we have and continue to have. It was a lot of work for everybody at the electrical department, the SEPA guys, all of our representatives, and it didn't go. I think a lot of people really appreciated what they did and the time they put in to make this thing happen. So I just wanted to say thanks a lot, and I really appreciate what you guys did.
Well said. Seeing no recognitions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, for real this time.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.
Well said.
Is that something for...
Nice work, everybody.